Good morning. The puppies are sparring, doing their stuff. Their play is their martial skills. They are developing tooth, fang, and claw in order to be more effective members of my triangle. They have started to cue off of their little big brother Zahn and switch on intermittently when he gets in hunting mode, which is good. They've had a couple of assist kills on the rodents, which is awesome. It's awesome. So let's talk about, I talk about manuals and how military manuals are not necessarily what you need when you're developing groups. Now but there are things to glean from them. The problem is that people don't speak that language. They don't have the context of the target audience of those manuals, which is soldiers. They don't understand. They go into a realm of mental assent quickly, thinking they know what it's like to patrol or IMT or to pull guard when they've never had to do it under accountability and pressure. Or they did it once, this one time at band camp or whatever, right? Not the same sport. It isn't, but you can glean stuff from those manuals, especially if you have a guide. And one of those is common sense. Common sense is a principle of patrolling. It's also a nice book. Common sense. Planning, reconnaissance, security, control, and common sense. These are principles of patrolling. These are principles that have stood the test of time. You can use those principles in a group. You can use those principles in development of teams. Those are elements that are a successful strategy. If you learn how to do those things with accountability and pressure, you'll be successful. Where people get it messed up is they start thinking task organization and stop asking the real questions and starting at Genesis, the beginning, right? You start in the beginning, which that's a principle that stood the test of time. People wondering about their faith and all this, we'll start in the beginning. What's it say in the beginning? Because those foundational principles that are contained within Genesis is the groundwork and the foundation for your belief system. Just is. Should be. You don't skip to the end of the book, right, and think you got it all figured out with no context. All right? It's silly. The wrong argument ensues because people skipped to the end of the book. You wouldn't read a normal book that way. You wouldn't go through a program with just the end. Go through the FTX, the field training exercise, without all the supporting skills. You have to develop all the supporting skills first. People look and see, there's elk poo. They look and they see individual movement techniques and they're like, oh, that's simple. Got it. No, you don't. Oh, you get offended right away. Oh, I have it. I understand it. I can tell you, if you didn't have the misfortune or fortune, depending on your perspective, of going through military indoctrination system with someone yelling at you to keep your ass down when you're low crawling, you may not understand that as well as you think you do. If you didn't have a machine gun shoot over your head as you were crawling under wire, you may not understand that as well as you think you do. Can you quantify it? You see, I use math as a blade. And what will happen is some people will emote in the comments here if I release this on YouTube, and they'll be like, well, I did this. Well, good for you, man. Good for you. Good for you. You want a gold star? You want a Wizzo button? Why are you seeking for approval online? What? Yeah, why are you seeking for approval online? Why do you feel the need to tote something, to write something, to waste someone's time? Oh, that blade cuts hard. How much have you read? You know what happens is people stop reading the comments. They stop reading the comments on YouTube because the majority of it is just emoting. If you could change that emotion to thankfulness, and the majority of the comments are thankful, or people expressing thanks, right? That changes the environment. It changes the focus. It gets rid of the whole, oh, I'm such a badass. Whatever, man. Whatever. A lot of people are cooler online. And people just start emoting, like it explodes on YouTube. And then the people who created the video that tweaked somebody a little bit, tweaked them a little bit, what they do, they spend their time, you know, they spend their time deleting, or just not, or they don't spend any time. That's the pendulum swinging the other way. They don't even comment on comments at all. They just let the kids act up in class. And then other people emote because they've looked through their comments and someone said something about someone else. And you see what I mean? It's this grade school bullshit. Hey, over here. Look at those guys. Good boys. Come on, this way. I think there's a fawn over there. So we don't want to have that type of environment. I don't want you to take the wrong context. If you are reading military manuals and you've never been a soldier, you're not bringing true context to it. If you read those ancient texts and you read about sheep, you may have mental assent to sheep, but you don't really understand sheep until you've owned sheep. If you've owned sheep and you've witnessed their behavior and you've tried to keep them alive and spite themselves, right? Because they do stupid shit all the time, the depth and breadth of your understanding of what those verses mean when their target audience at the time was an agrarian culture, you really get what it's saying. You get it on a level of intimacy, of relational knowledge that you would not have if you did not raise sheep, if you've never planted seeds and grown them, if you've never been fishing with nets. If you think of the context of the target audience of the day and the struggles of the day of what it was like to create fire by friction, there wasn't Bic lighters back then. So the principles start to come out more so when you have a relationship with the context. And that's why I bring this up so much when it comes to military manuals. People may identify as a soldier, but having never served. You see that in certain denominations where like, you're in the Lord's army, right? Because it does what? It evokes emotion. There's a deer right there. There's a buck. Yeah, there was something in here. Oh, there's another one. Because the emotion. See him running? People saying, oh, well, there won't be any deer around when stuff gets bad. Well, maybe not where you're at. I've seen way more deer this morning than people. Context is key. Context is key. You can glean principles. It's easier to glean the principles out if you have a guide. If you have a guide who's been there, because they understand with more relationship to the information than you do of what it's really saying. That is a thing. That is a fact. It's hard for someone who lives around asphalt and concrete to really understand what it's like to manage a field, right? The contextual difference is so broad, right? You all have professions, hopefully. You have professions. Hopefully you're working, right? Because he who doesn't work shouldn't eat. You all have professions that does what? That has its own vernacular, that has its own context, that has its own slang, has its own terms. And those terms have a deeper and fuller meaning to you than they might someone else. So Jake brakes of a logging truck, right? I know that sound because I hear that sound all the time. You may not know that sound because you don't live near the forest where there's constant logging certain times of the year. I could tell you that's a logging truck by its sound. Now I could play that sound to you, and if you lived in the city, that sound would have no anchoring effect based off of relationship knowledge. I know that's a logging truck because I've seen them with the sound. I've been in them with buddies driving them, right? I've been around logging trucks enough to know that's the sound that they make. And I know here in this environment, when they're coming down the hill, that's the sound, right? Because they have their brakes on. I can hear that because I have a relationship with it. If you don't have a relationship with the context and the content of the book, of the manual, right, you don't know where they're coming from. If you're reading Hemingway and you don't know, the stuff that he talked about and the context of where he was when he wrote that, you don't have the deeper understanding of what Hemingway is trying to say, because context is key. You can read books and it takes a long time. Maybe you get 1 or 2 gold nuggets out of it, right? That's a principle. I've read many books and they were worth it. They were worth the whole read just to get one principle that was life-changing. It's easier if you find a teacher and mentor who's read all the books and done the things and can recognize triangles right off the bat, who has done it enough to where they recognize stuff right off the bat and they pay attention to stuff right off the bat because they can see because they have the established experience using tools in contexts that you may not. Because they know the function. Because they have the reps and sets of the function. It doesn't mean there's not nuggets of knowledge for your ass pack of facts, to quote one of my instructors who was from the Corps, one of the courses they took. So I always thought that was funny. Doesn't matter if it's just one. If it changes your life, was it worth it? If it changes your behavior in a positive fashion, was it worth it? If it just made you feel good, how temporary is that? How temporary is that type of information, make you feel good? Or those classes that make you feel good? Okay, well, if feeling good's good enough for you, fine, if that's what you want. But if you want something that has stood the test of time, that is going to change you in a different direction, realign your azimuth, prevent you from wasting resources in the wrong direction, you may want to talk to someone who's been there and done that in that genre. Because they can fast forward your education process because they've seen it 1,000 times. literally in some cases, sometimes 10,000 times, so they can see it right off. Didn't put enough dirt down, saw it right off. But I'll let you catch your ass on fire so that the lesson will sink in. Remember that scene from Jeremiah Johnson with Bear Claw Grizzlap? Why? Because Jeremiah was what? He knew his stuff. He'd been in war. He was a mountain man by God. He knew what he was doing. He didn't know the ways of the mountain. Mountain's got its own ways. Mountain's got its own ways. And those who don't have the reps and sets in the mountain may have mental assent to what the mountain is like. But that mental assent can get your ass killed because you don't have the right skills. You can set yourself on fire by doing your fire bed wrong, which you can burn your blanket up and lose your primary sheltering device because you didn't pay enough attention, because you got it, the details that the instructor was trying to show you. If you want some information and instruction that pays attention to detail, come to my Patreon page. If not, don't. If you found this useful, help out with the algorithms, like, share, subscribe, all that. Put on the loop, the saw loop, so I can get the hours, so I can ban a lot of those bots that have the same address that I've reported multiple times, that keep putting the same crap on my videos, which waste my time. If you found this use of my time giving to you beneficial in any way, help me out. You can help me out in ways that don't cost anything. Hey, no. You can help me out in ways that don't cost anything. So get outside in the high mountains if you can. Carry rucksacks, not feelings bags. Shalom.